Welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast, your home for weekly information and inspiration to help you get the graduate job of your dreams.
Hello and welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast with your host, James Curran. The Graduate Job Podcast is your home for all things related to helping you on your journey to finding that amazing job. Each episode I bring together the best minds in the industry, speaking to leading authors, entrepreneurs, coaches and bloggers who bring decades of experience into a bite-sized weekly 30-minute-ish show. Put simply, this is the show I wish I had a decade ago when I graduated. And hello and welcome to the 73rd episode of the Graduate Job Podcast. In this episode, I speak with Paul Murphy, author of the brilliant new book, 1000 Years of Career Advice, which details the career journeys and advice of 100 graduates 10 years after graduation. In this episode, we delve into the book in detail, exploring some of the cumulative wisdom from the collective 1000 years of career advice. We explore some of the different career journeys that people have taken in those 10 years since leaving university, and look at the advice they give students who are just about to graduate. We cover the pros and cons of graduate schemes, why you shouldn't stay in your first graduate job too long, and why travel and working abroad should definitely be on your agenda as a recent graduate. We touch upon the power of work experience and why you really shouldn't worry as you start out in your career. No matter where you are in your job search, just about to graduate or already searching for your first graduate job, this episode is packed full of brilliant advice and is definitely one you aren't going to want to miss. As always, all links and a full transcript can be found in the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/1000 years. That's the numbers 1000 and years. From there, you'll also be able to find links to all of the other 72 episodes which cover every aspect of getting a graduate job, from help with interviews, assessment centres, to specific companies, to finding a job you love. Check them out, you won't go far wrong. Don't forget as well to make sure you check out graduatejobpodcast.com/subscribe, which links to how to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube and by email. So something for everyone there. Before we start, let's have a little message from today's sponsor, who are our friends over at careergym.com. Now, if I said to you, are you ready to do verbal and numerical reasoning tests for the job of your dreams tomorrow? I bet most of you would say no. Well, graduate employers don't hang about. Some of them give you as little as 2 to 3 days notice before you have to do the tests. So you need to make sure you are ready and willing to do the tests and start practicing now, which is where careergym.com comes in. CareerGym is the #1 place for you to undertake all of your psychometric tests which you're going to face when you apply for a graduate job. No matter what graduate job you apply for, you're going to have to do some sort of verbal, numerical reasoning, situational judgment and working style tests. You can practice these at careergym.com as well as the numerical and abstract reasoning tests. They are all produced by testing experts and exactly the same as the ones you'll see in the real graduate job tests. You can just practice them as you want, or you can do them in exam mode under time pressure, and they all come with detailed explanations and solutions, and you can track your progress and see how you compare against your peers. Now, as I said, it's never too early to start revising for psychometric tests, as you're not going to get much notice. So make sure that you are ready to go. If you're applying for a graduate job, you're going to have to do them. So pull your finger out now and start revising straight away to make sure you don't fall at this first hurdle. I've been recommending the site for years to the clients I coach, and it comes very highly recommended. What's even better is if you use the code GJP, you'll get 20% off all of their tests. You can't say fairer than that. So head on over to careergym.com, that's careergym.com, and use the code GJP to get 20% off and start practicing today. Now on with the show.
A very warm welcome today to Paul Murphy, author of the brilliant book I've got in my hands, 1000 Years of Careers Advice. Paul, welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast.
Thanks, James. It's a pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Doing very well. And the book is such a simple idea, but it's just so useful. So do you want to fill listeners in on a little bit of background about yourself and also about the book?
Yeah, sure. So I'm 33. I'm from the west of Ireland, a place called Sligo, qualified as an accountant with a Big Four accounting firm. And for the last 10 years, I've worked in various roles with big multinational companies. And the reason I guess I wrote the book is I knew there wasn't anything really on career paths on the internet. Because I always have tried to find out more about people's career paths and seek people out who are older than me, because I haven't been a huge fan of finance. So I've always kind of said, well, could I go in a different direction and try to talk to people? And I also knew that some of my friends, they were doing something very different to what they did in uni for a job. Some of them maybe mightn't even have liked their jobs. Some of them want to change. And so I knew all of this stuff. And then I thought it might be interesting to interview 100 graduates 10 years out of uni to see what the benefit of hindsight they would say and what advice they'd give for a younger generation.
Yeah, and that's where the thousand years of advice comes from the 10 years from each of the 100 people. And yeah, it's such a I think fascinating insight that they're able to give. I think when you're starting out in your career and you see people ahead of you, you almost think that they've strategically and laser-like focused planned on how they get there. And it's really interesting when you look at where people are and then look at their paths to get how they got there, and you see that it's anything but.
Absolutely, absolutely. And all of the 100 people, they were so willing to help because they had been in the exact same shoes as graduates now, faced the exact same problems. They worried about whether they were doing the right thing themselves or wondering about their career paths. So it's very interesting. Everyone was really enthusiastic about it and happy to help the younger generation.
Oh, that's brilliant. And today what we're going to do is we're going to explore the book in more detail and pick out a couple of the interesting career paths from people from the book, and then think about some of the advice that they have offered to, as you mentioned, people coming in their path. So maybe starting off with some of the interesting careers from people in the books. Maybe if we start with Colm, who immediately piqued my interest with his story. Could we delve into that one first?
Yeah, sure. Colm was a great one. So Colm, bit like myself, he trained as an accountant with a Big Four firm in Dublin. And after his 3-year training contract was up, he went traveling South America. And during his travels, he was like, what about if I set up a hostel? And so he went to one of the biggest hostels in South America, and he said, could I franchise your name and set up a sister hostel in Cuzco, Peru? So he did that. And I interviewed him about that kind of 4 or 5 years of his life. And he didn't really see it as work. He saw it as kind of enabling people have the time of their lives. He was like managing a team of chefs, receptionists, cleaners. There's 180 beds in the hostel, 180 different personalities every night. He wanted Cuzco to be the highlight of their whole year away. He loved it. He didn't see him putting in hours as a job or work. It's like really inspiring because he kind of contrasted that with his time working as an accountant in the 3-year training contract.
And that's slightly different.
Yeah, and he couldn't be more different. So he didn't enjoy that work, but he just was out of university. He thought that's what people did. It was just a job to pay their bills. And then after having ran the hostel for 4 or 5 years, he realized that was so not the case, that people can really, really enjoy what they do for a living. And he tells young people, I ask every interview is structured. The first bit is a bit about their degree, second bit is a bit about their job since they graduated, and the third bit is a bit about their advice for a younger generation. And his advice is great. He tells people that just because they did something for a degree or for a qualification doesn't mean you can do something completely different and really enjoy it. Make things happen, try things out, figure out what you really love to do. So it's a really inspiring read.
No, I completely agree. And as a former geographer myself, so I did geography as my degree. It was really interesting as read through the 100 people and seeing the ones who'd also done a geography degree and just seeing where they'd end up and the sort of roles that they'd done and the sort of careers that they were in now. It was interesting just tracing us all from that same point of the initial degree and then just seeing the divergent paths that people had taken as they went along.
And what I would say, totally, James. And what I would say is he had kind of transferable skills from the accounting. And so for graduates or young people now, or even people who are a bit older and they want to change into careers, check out what the transferable skills you have that might kind of allow you to move sideways into something that you might enjoy more. Try and be a little bit creative. He doesn't run that hostel anymore. He's just set up a whiskey bar in Sydney called the Doss House. So he's like he's a serial entrepreneur now. So it's you can, whatever you want to do, you can do it if you want it bad enough.
Well, listeners, next time you're in Sydney, make sure you pop into the Doss House and tell him that you heard about him here on the Graduate Job Podcast. One of the things that really struck me, Paul, from the book is the question you asked each of the people you interviewed. What percentage of what you learned in university have you used in your day-to-day roles? And what's fascinating is just the low percentage of the scores that people gave for that question, from nothing at all to 10%, if sort of as a max of people putting to use what they learn in their degree and what the job they end up working in.
Yeah, totally. And I think young people, like if you're 18 or 20 or 21, you probably think your degree, a lot of people in the book thought their law degree would qualify them to teach law or work as a lawyer or practice as an accountant. And you've kind of a long road ahead of you once you graduate. But you don't really know that when you're 18 or 20. It's really just a tool to get your foot in the door of universities, your degree. And so I think we know that looking back as 30-year-olds, but it's tough to know that when you're in your early 20s.
No, completely. And as you mentioned, it's all about the transferable skills. And I think people reference that some of the courses are better than others for that. And people in the book talk about their courses maybe not having those direct skills that they put to use in their day-to-day work, but just giving them the broad ability to present in front of people or think about the analytical thinking or things like that, and just being able to use them in the roles that they then go into.
Totally. Couldn't agree more.
So then maybe picking out another example of someone with an interesting path, who would you pick out from the book?
Well, a couple of my favorites. One of them was David. So David graduated at the height of the 2008 recession. He had an undergrad and postgrad in human resources, couldn't get a job for love or money, very qualified. So he approached an insurance company, big insurance firm in Dublin, and said, how about I work for free for a month? Can I come in and work for free? And they said, sure, yeah, why not? Did the same thing second month, worked very hard, free. Same thing third month, worked for free again. And then a maternity cover came up, and they gave him that 9-month maternity cover contract. And no way would he have got that if he hadn't been learning the ropes in those previous 2-3 months. And so he ended up spending 5 years in that company, and was quite a senior HR business partner when he left. He's now a pretty successful dude. So really, if you're a graduate out there, or if you're unemployed, or if you're having a tough time with aptitude tests and video interviews, try and be a bit creative. Try and maybe see, can you work for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month for free? And if you can get in, just get your foot in the door and show you're good with people and show you're you can learn the ropes, you'd be amazed about how far you can go. So I'd really I don't know about you, James, but I'm 33 now. And in a way, it's a pity I'm not like 20, 21, 22, because I'd email 40, 50 very successful people, maybe entrepreneurs, and I'd say, hey, can I just shadow you for a month or 2 months? Can I, help you run errands or take minutes or whatever it is? Because I think you learn so much doing that, as opposed to like an entry-level grad job in a finance department or a HR department. So that's what I kind of take maybe a leaf out of David's book and just try and see, can you do something a bit differently if you're struggling to get that start when you're in your 20s.
That's really impressive perseverance there, from sticking it out from the 1 month and then 2 months and then 3 months, and just having the confidence in your ability that you're going to make something happen to still be there to get those opportunities, because you do need to put yourself out there. No one's going to just knock on your door one day and offer you a job. You need to get out and make things happen.
And totally, and it was a real investment for him. It was probably one of the best investments of time that he'll do in his life. And then another one of my faves was a friend of mine called Suzanne. So Suzanne has like a real unconventional career path. She did zoology for her degree, and in the 4th year, the uni kind of said to her, well, you're going to struggle to get jobs out of this degree. So she was like, oh, well, great, thanks very much. And she, I don't know, can some of your listeners maybe relate to that? But anyway, she didn't have a clue what she wanted to do. She had this zoology degree in her back pocket, and she went traveling. She had some confidence issues, which I'm sure every 20-year-old has, every 30-year-old, everyone really. She came back from traveling, still didn't know what she wanted to do. She got a job in a phone shop selling phones, was very good at it, but she was like, oh, do I want to be doing this for the rest of my life? Her sister got her a job doing finance, and she did finance for a couple of years. Didn't really like the finance stuff, but selling phones, she had increased her confidence. She had a lot of good kind of sales and presenting skills. And then she was like, don't like the finance stuff, but I like creating the finance processes for the small company she worked for. So she goes, well, maybe I'd like a more creative job or role or company to work for. And now she's like an account director who looks after, multiple clients for a really cool media company in Dublin. So her career path was like really meandering. She tried out loads of different things, and now she absolutely loves her job. So I'd really kind of encourage people to just try things out. That's the one thing one of the things I got from 100 interviews. You can really try things out in your 20s and with like little risk, and you can move around, do different roles, leave after a year, trying a different role. And you can't really do that in your 30s. So any of your listeners kind of who are in your 20s, try and get as broad and as varied a skill set as you can, because it'll allow you to be a lot more flexible when you do come to your 30s, a bit like Suzanne. So that was a kind of really inspiring one for me.
In the book, you ask them, what would you do again if you just were to start over at age 22, knowing what you know now about your career. And it's interesting the number of people that said, well, I actually stayed too long in my first role. I should have moved on sooner. And I know personally that was a situation for me. I tended to stuck around in my first graduate scheme probably longer than I should have done. But as you mentioned, when you're 20, it's easier to move than when you're 30 and might have more responsibilities. But also now, no one expects you to no one expects a job for life. No one expects you to to be in your first job for 10, 15, 20 years. I saw people at the grad scheme I worked at, 18 months, just try it, like it, move on to something else that was more suited to them. Just as you said, just trying different things.
Totally. And speaking of trying different things, another good one that I really liked, that's kind of shows you how you can change careers easier than people might think. A friend of mine called Niall did civil engineering, very smart guy, did 4 years civil engineering degree, did like 4 or 5 years working as a civil engineer, and then he was like, oh, I just don't like this. I'm like watching the clock every day. And he said, well, I don't want to waste the last 9 years of my life, and just throw that in the bin. And I think a lot of people think like that. They're like, no, I don't want to go back to college, or I don't want to start again because I've just wasted so much time. But what I found very interesting, he looked at the future. So he was like, well, forget about the 9 years I wasted. What about the 30 years left that I have to work? So he was like, I really don't want that to be as unenjoyable as my time now. So he tried to figure out what he liked, and he liked IT stuff and software stuff. Did like a 12-month master's with 3 months of work experience. And he says that the 3 months was key because out of that 3 months work experience, he had practical experience. He wasn't just a guy with a master's trying to change career, and that the company offered him a permanent role. So pretty much after that year's master's, he was in a permanent job doing a completely different career. So that kind of made me sit up and take notice. And I was like, wow, 12 months and you could have a new lease of life. So I'm not sure a lot of my friends kind of realize that. They go, oh, it's a big slog to go back and change, or, what would my parents say, or it's a risky. So I thought Nile was a really good one about like changing careers.
And it leads us nicely on to at the end of the book. You have a really cool section. I like the quote you have from Albert Einstein: "The only source of knowledge is experience." And what you do is you group together the advice of the 100 graduates into nice pithy little sections. And maybe if we start with university, it touches upon findings that Niall had there. Can you maybe take us through what the top 3 most common bits of advice from the graduates were about university?
Yeah, sure. So there was so much advice, James. All the 100 guys offered 3, 4, 5 pieces of advice. So there was like a huge 370 pages of advice. So this was kind of the way I thought I could maybe group together the ones that really stood out. So university, a lot of the interviewees said, well, the majority said, the more work placements you do, the better. And I like that is just so true. It like rings out so loud from 100 people in their 30s. Because the benefits are like you can figure out what you like, what you don't like, lets you test things out. A 3-month or a 6-month work placement puts you ahead of your peers, gives you a bit of a head start when you're looking for jobs. And a lot of the time, the interviewee said that as someone doing work experience in their firm, they got permanent jobs out of it. So work placements, I think, are just invaluable. I really, just interviewing 100 people just cemented my thinking on that. And then some of the other university ones, a lot of people said research the jobs that you can get out of your degree. I think in my generation, people just applied for jobs. If they got a job, they were happy, they took it, and, probably just worked in that career or role for the next X number of years. But a lot of my friends, they said if they would go back, they would research what graduates would get out of those careers. So talk to people 10 years down the line. What kind of jobs are they doing? Does it appeal to you? What kind of money are they earning? Do they like their jobs? Are they pigeonholed? So do your research. It will really, really stand to you. And then some of the other tips I gave, more career focused. One of the big ones coming out of the book is go and live and work abroad. I don't know what your thoughts are, James, but a lot of my mates did it in their 20s. And I don't know a single person in their 30s who has gone and worked abroad. Life starts getting in the way. You've got weddings, you've got kids, people get more comfortable. They don't want to maybe live out of a backpack.
Yep.
That was a big thing coming out of the book. Do go and live and work and travel abroad. You'll have the time of your life in your 20s. Don't put it off.
Yeah, and I'd so just jumping in there, I'd definitely agree. I mean, I was lucky; I was able to spend after university, spent a year teaching English out in China, and yeah,
Nice.
the friends I made there, and still some of my best friends now, and you just it was great for the CV. It was amazing fun, and yeah, I really got the sense from reading the different profiles of people who'd worked abroad. You ask a question of is work fun, and I can't remember the name of who it was, but one of them who had been working in China said, yeah, it would actually sort of been too much fun. So yeah, you got the sense that they were crafting a brilliant career, but they're also really enjoying themselves at the same time, which is what's important.
That really, yeah, well noticed. That stood out. All the people, like I interviewed people in Australia, Canada, Oman, China, the UAE, they all none of them regretted doing it, going abroad. They all increased their personal skills, had a great time, new networks of people. They were like, Colin has a big quote, you're out there in the world, finding stuff out. So travel, I think, is so key. Would you have put it to the acid test? Would you go and teach English now in your 30s in China?
I'd work abroad again. I'm not sure about if there was a major recession and I was out of work here, I'd go teach again. But yeah, I loved it. It was really good fun, and the skills that you develop, especially stood in front of a class and speaking to people, so many transferable skills and the softer skills that I was able to play upon when I went through the application process, and it definitely helped me in my career with getting on the first graduate scheme. They were really interested in the things that I'd learned, and if you maybe compared me with a year teaching in China with somebody who'd either not been working in the UK or doing a lower level job, it just gives you that sort of difference to help you stand out, which is what it's all about when you're one of 1,000 people applying for a spot in a grad scheme. You want to be able to stand out somehow.
Totally. And I don't know, did you find this? But some of my interviewees were like, oh, go abroad, do it like as much as possible, because if you do little things like setting up a bank account, trying to get a job, all those little things abroad, if you can do all that stuff and set up a life for yourself, getting an apartment in, I don't know, France or China, it just seems easy when you come back to Ireland or England to do all that stuff. So, it's really, really developing stuff.
No, I completely agree, and I'll link to it in the show notes. But I've done an episode on how to apply for a graduate job abroad. I mean, as Brits, it's easier to go work in the Commonwealth, so Australia, New Zealand, Canada. Especially if you're under the age of 30, you can get a two-year visa really easily. So, and also, being able to work anywhere you want in Europe at the moment, take advantage while you can. But the opportunities are there. It's just a question of just reaching out and grabbing them.
Totally. And one of my other tips in the career section at the back of the book, or not tips, but one of the messages that kind of jumps out from the 100 interviewees is related to that, stepping out of your comfort zone. So a lot of the people in their 30s, they said, don't be afraid to take risks. Now is the time in your 20s to do it. Go ask people for stuff. Try and reach out to people for coffees. You've nothing to lose. And there'll always be a million reasons not to do something. And they are really encouraging, when you're in your 20s, just do it. You mightn't feel comfortable doing it, but that's the way you're going to stretch and develop yourself and learn and just be a better individual, really. And it's so true.
And you never know where those conversations are going to go.
Yeah.
And it's never been easier to reach out to people now than from LinkedIn and Twitter. Totally. You can just pick any career you want. You can type it into LinkedIn. You've got access to the top people in an industry, or the people near you, or the people that work at companies that you want to work at. So you can reach out to them so easily.
And totally. Go on, Sergeant.
Sorry, Paul. So one question. One of the ones that listeners often think about is applying for the big graduate schemes. What was the feedback from the people you interviewed in terms of the pros and cons of the bigger graduate programs, having been through them?
So it was interesting. The pros, they said, you have a ready-made network. You get different aspects of the business, so you get rotated into parts of the business that you wouldn't in a regular job, and you can learn a lot. But some of them, I interviewed quite a lot of people who did a grad scheme in varying companies, and some of them said, well, to be honest, I found the learning curve a bit shallow. They thought they might have learned more if they went to an investment bank or, another company, or done something else. And one of the cons, which is very interesting, a lot of people said it's very dependent on your manager or who is your client. So if you're stuck at a client site, for, I don't know, X number of months, and you're not really learning and you're not really enjoying it, or your manager is kind of giving you a lot of work to do and you're not learning from a manager. So it was kind of a balanced view. But the only thing I would say is, another pro was that you make friends for life. Out of my grad scheme in the Big Four, I met so many cool people, and you really do make friends for life. Like, I interviewed several of them for the book. They're all in very different jobs now. I could reach out to them and ask them for advice. So I think that's a huge thing with a grad scheme.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that struck me that someone said in the book, and I completely agreed with it, but I hadn't really thought about it until I read it, was the comment they made about it's almost an extension of university. Those
Yeah,
first couple of years when everyone's young, they're in their early 20s, you're working hard, but it's a very social place to be. These companies often invest well into you. They, if you're at the bigger grad schemes and there's a big cohort of you and there's social functions, you're meeting for drinks on a weekly basis. And often if you're in a new city that you're moving to be part of the scheme, you've got that ready-made network already, and it is just those early years are like an extension of university. It's good fun.
totally. And one thing springs to mind, I gotta say it. One of my interviewees, Georgie, she said that she hires loads of young people now. She's like an account director for an advertising agency. And she says, grad schemes aren't the be all and end all. She would much rather see a person come in as an entry level assistant or even a receptionist, she was saying, learn the ropes, show that you're personable, show that you're hardworking, show that you're a fast learner. And she says a lot of times those roles progress faster than someone in a grad scheme. So I think a lot of graduates now, they get a bit depressed and they're like, oh, I can't get a grad scheme. It's so competitive. And they get a bit, I don't know, despondent. But I really would encourage people to be a bit more creative. See, can you go shadow someone? See, does your dad know a friend of a friend who can get you like a month in working in some place's work experience? Grad schemes, they're great, but they're not the be all and end all, I would think.
No, I completely agree. And I've seen that in the places I've worked, is people who've joined in more junior positions and then showed what they can do, and they work their way up, and they do tend to progress quicker than people who maybe join from the graduate scheme and just aren't as motivated and aren't as driven. And people who show the initiative to get in then often sort of fly through the ranks once they are in there.
Totally.
So maybe thinking then, turning it on its head and thinking about some of the advice about what not to do. What was some of the key advice from the 100 interviewees about what not to do from a career perspective?
So what not to do, I think this is a really common problem. A lot of people in their 20s and even older, 30s and 40s, they kind of worry and they're like, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right career path? But really, I think it's just nervous energy wasted. Once you get to your 30s, you're like, well, there was no need for me to worrying. It all works out, And that's a big thing from the 100 interviewees. They might have had like bumps and kind of blips and things might have gone their way for like a little period of time, but they're all very happy, successful people now. And I think you don't really realize that when you're 20s. You're like, oh, you're unsure. You're not, maybe, is this the right thing to do? But don't worry. That was a big theme coming out of the book. Another theme coming out was keep your options open. So a lot of my friends, they've taken jobs when they graduated, and they kind of have pigeonholed themselves. So they might be working in a funds company and then spend 5-6 years working in a funds company. It's very hard to get out of that. So try and keep your options open and be open-minded. Don't shut doors on yourself. That's why a key piece of advice is if you can do as much varied roles in your 20s and keep your experience broad, well, then you're a bit of a jack of all trades, and you'll have plenty of doors open when you hit your 30s and you kind of realize a bit more about what you want to do. And then another one, if you're talking top 3, is take your time. So a lot of the interviewees, they kind of jumped into a job, and barely anyone turned down a job. I wouldn't necessarily be afraid of turning down a job. If a company wants you enough, then it shows you're a high value candidate. Maybe sit it out and try and see, can you get a better company or a better role or more money? So I think when you're in your 20s, you're a bit naive and you don't really realize that. So that was a lot of something the interviewee said in hindsight.
No, brilliant. And I think that's why this is such a worthwhile book that listeners need to invest in to get a copy in, is, when you when you do start out your career, as you mentioned, you do worry. You worry that you're doing the right thing, you're applying to the right places, you've got the right degree, have you made the right choices? And yeah, the overall theme I got from reading all the different interviews was, don't worry, it all works out all right in the end. You see people meander, and I've said before on the podcast, I think career comes from the French word for carrier, which apparently means road, and that's what it is. It's a windy road, and
Nice.
it takes zigs and zags that you might not expect, but as long as you keep going, you're never going to fail. So it's read the book and be inspired from the 100 different interviews, and you'll be able to see links to the book and a full transcript of everything that we've talked about here in the show notes over at graduatejobpodcast.com/1000years. So, Paul, time unfortunately is running away with us. So let's maybe shift gears and move on to the weekly staple questions. Sticking on the theme of books, what one book would you recommend that our listeners should read?
Tough question, James. I would say Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So if you haven't heard about it, it's by a guy called Robert Kiyosaki, and he basically grew up with two dads. So his real father and his best mates or best friend's dad. And both of them were very inspirational in his life. Both of them taught him very different things. And Kiyosaki actually turned out to be a millionaire because of kind of the lessons he learned from the both fathers. And so really the crux of the book is how the rich make money work for them, and then poor people, middle class, work for their money. So it's like it's like one of the top selling finance books or self-development books of all time. And it's really small. I found it I read it maybe 10 years ago, but I still think it's an absolute great book.
Yeah, I'd echo that. It's one that's probably going to change the way that you look at assets and liabilities. Having read that book, and it's a nice, easy. Don't let me put you off by saying that. It's a nice, easy read, and yeah, definitely one that will stick with you. So yeah, Paul, a top recommendation there. So you've set the bar high there. Moving on to what internet resource would you point our listeners to?
I think really just for the people listening to this, I think Twitter is a really good resource. I didn't have a Twitter account until I wrote the book, and I now follow a lot of the top career influencers. And if you're in your 20s and you're trying to figure things out career-wise, some of the articles that those guys post, they're fantastic. They really are fantastic. They draw on their best articles, retweet them, tweet them. I really think, if I had them when I was in my early 20s or 18, 19, might have been a completely different story. So I really would use Twitter.
And I think that's how I initially got in touch with you, Paul, wasn't it, on Twitter?
Yeah.
So there you go, listeners. It's practice what I preach. It's a great way to reach out to people and to say hello to them. So definitely. And how can listeners find you on Twitter, Paul?
I am 100 Career Paths is my name on Twitter, and my blog, while we're kind of on it, how to get in touch, is 100yearsofcareeradvice.com, and on there you'll find lots of interviews from the book and lots of other really good articles on careers. So do check them out if you're interested in reading about some of these career paths and how people would advise younger generations.
Brilliant. And links to everything we've discussed today will be over in the show notes, as I mentioned, at graduatejobpodcast.com/1000years. And final question, Paul, what one tip would you give listeners that they can implement today to help them on their job search?
I think if I could give one tip, and like I said, there's hundreds and hundreds of tips given in the book, but if I could pick out one, it would be reach out to people a few years ahead of you. So they will have been in your shoes before. They can advise you on what you should do next. They may even know people who are hiring. So it might be daunting as a, 20, 25, 30-year-old reaching out to 10, 15 strangers that you don't know. But if 2 or 3 come back to you, they will give you some great tailor-made advice, which will give you a great head start on your peers. So just to give you an example, let's say you're a lawyer, or let's say you're a law graduate and you're trying to get a job as a lawyer. Instead of maybe reading, shiny prospectuses from law companies, go onto LinkedIn, type in property lawyer or whatever the title is of a lawyer in their, late 20s. Reach out to them, say, hi, I'm a bit confused about what path to take in law. Could I just have a coffee with you or ask you a couple of questions, 5-10 minutes? And those guys, they will have the situation that you are in so fresh in their mind that they'll give you awesome advice. So try and reach out to 10, 15, 20 of those guys. It's a numbers game. You get 2 or 3 come back to you, and you really will get great advice. As opposed to if you reached out to someone who is a partner in a law firm who's 40, 45, 50, they won't really know about how video interviews are, grad scheme applications are. So try and reach out to those guys just a step ahead of you in the process. I think that's one of the best tips I could give your listeners.
That's brilliant advice, and completely echo everything Paul said there. And if you follow that advice, you won't go far wrong at all. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. You mentioned your website and Twitter there. Is there any other ways that people can get in touch with you?
Instagram, my blog, and basically Twitter. Yeah, that's the 3 ways. And do have a read of the book, because it really is the power of hindsight. So if you've ever got good career advice from one person, you'll get it from 100 people in this book. So I really would encourage for young people to read it, because it will be so valuable, I think, for them.
Completely agree. Paul, thank you so much for appearing on the Graduate Job Podcast.
Absolute gent. Thanks a million, James. It was a pleasure.
Many thanks again to Paul Murphy. Such a simple idea for a book, but it works so well, and it really is worth investing in. If you're unsure about what it is that you want to do with your career, then you're going to get a ton of brilliant insights into other people's careers, looking at how they navigated and thrived in the difficult role of getting a graduate job, and then in the first 10 years of their jobs, or lack of jobs. You'll quickly see that most of the people featured have had a meandering route to career success. So don't be worried if your graduate job hunt is maybe taking a little longer or isn't quite as smooth as you hoped. Check out the links to the book and everything we talked about today in the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/1000 years. That's the numbers 1000 and years. Whilst you're there, don't forget to head on over to graduatejobpodcast.com/subscribe and sign up so that you don't miss a thing. I'm developing a course on how to get a graduate job, which is going to distill down all my years of coaching into one place. So make sure you don't miss out the launch details for that one. If you've got any questions, need some help coaching or with an application, then do drop me a line. Again at hello@graduatejobpodcast.com. Finally, if you would like to support the show as well, to help ensure that I keep putting out great episodes, one way you can do it at no cost to yourself is by clicking on the Amazon links in the show notes and then buying anything you want from Amazon, as Amazon provides a small commission to me if you do so. It doesn't cost you anything, but it does help to keep the lights on here with the hosting and all costs like that. So that is just about everything. Do join me next week when I speak with Scott Mounts on finding an inspiring graduate job. It's a goodie. All that remains to say is I hope you enjoyed the episode today, but more importantly, I hope you use it and apply it. See you next week.